After 58 years, an amazing encounter at the station revealed a hidden love from an unexpected past. Samuel Sam O'Reilly stood at the edge of the platform, his uniform slightly faded but still crisp, feeling the vibrations of the approaching train rumbling through the tracks beneath him. He was preparing for his last shift, a milestone respected by some, but felt as more of a loss than a victory in his heart. Memories danced around him like ethereal ghosts, whispers of laughter, fleeting glances, moments he had once cherished. At 75, each day was an echo of time slipping through his fingers. But on this day, the familiar rhythm of trains brought back more than just routine. It beckoned the name that haunted him, Margaret. He could still hear her laugh, the way her eyes sparkled at the chance to live a different life, a life not mapped by obligation, but driven by love. The thought of her sent waves of regret crashing over him. While he had chosen stability, Margaret had chosen freedom, and their paths diverged in a way that haunted him every day since. What if he had taken a chance? What if? The haunting words filled his mind as he hoisted himself up to the attic of the station, where dust particles glistened like tiny stars in the thin beams of sunlight. The attic was an abandoned place, filled with relics of the past, but what caught his eye was a box nestled against the wall, buried under layers of dust. With eager hands he unpacked it, revealing a treasure trove of letters shared between him and Margaret during their youthful days. As he unfolded one of her letters, a rush of nostalgia swept over him, a longing that underscored every word penned on that fragile paper. He read about dreams both shared and unfulfilled, of paths diverged, and of a love nurtured in the shadows of practicality. Each line resonated unease deep in his chest, unearthed by time yet still raw. Regret pooled within him, urging him to confront the choices he had made. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Just as Sam felt ready to close the box of memories, the sound of a train whistle shattered the silence, drawing him back into the present. The air crackled around him, and an electric pulse surged through his veins as he spotted her. Margaret, aged but undeniably familiar, standing at the far end of the platform, her eyes searching the crowd. Sam's heart raced, each beat a countdown that felt agonizingly slow.
The years melted away into a moment as they locked eyes, time folding itself, resurrecting unresolved feelings. But as he took a step forward, the moment shifted. Their conversation danced between laughter and heaviness, hinting at the unfinished chapters of their lives. Regrets bubbled to the surface, marriages, children, paths chosen that kept them apart. The words he longed to ask hung in the air like a weight, a question that even he feared to voice. What if? He could feel the tension coiling inside him, as if the universe was presenting him a chance to shift history and seize what he thought was lost forever. Yet standing before the love of his life, clarity slipped from his grasp as uncertainty tightened its grip. Would he dare to plunge into the depths of vulnerability? As the final train pulled away, its whistle fading into the distance, Sam stood frozen, the looming question filling every silent moment between them. Would courage guide him, or would he remain ensnared in the shadows of what could have been? The world around Sam blurred into a haze, his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind as he stood there, paralyzed by the weight of that unasked question. Margaret's presence ignited an urgency within him, one that had lain dormant for years, quietly suffocated by the routines and responsibilities he had embraced. The echoes of the past were calling, braided with paths not taken and dreams unrealized. He sensed the gravity of the moment, the potential for both heartbreak and exhilaration, a duality that threatened to crush him under its intensity. Would he let another opportunity slip through his fingers, just as he had so many before? The thought prompted a fierce pang of determination. This was not just a reunion. It was a reckoning, a pivotal moment calling him to confront the life he had crafted and the love he had allowed to drift away. As they exchanged tentative words, Sam could see the subtle grace in Margaret's smile, her demeanor confounding yet grounding. They spoke of shared memories, their words soft and breezy at first, but laden with an undercurrent of unsaid truths. Each sentence passed between them not only wrapped them in nostalgia, but began to lay the foundation for something deeper, perhaps reconciliation, perhaps confrontation. "Do you ever think about it, Sam?" Margaret asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as they searched his. "The choices we made?" His heart raced at her directness, feeling that hidden reservoir of hope surge within. Was it possible she felt that twinge of regret too? The years spent in the safe embrace of predictability suddenly felt like shackles. "I think about it every day," he confessed, a tremor in his voice betraying his internal struggle. No longer tethered to prudence, this was a moment of vulnerability, the window into the man he had become, layered with years of regret and questions of identity. "I often wondered what life would have been like if I had chosen differently."
She nodded, a slow understanding playing across her features. "We had a chance, didn't we? Back then in that little cafe by the river." Her reminder threw Sam back in time, recalling the summer evenings filled with laughter, hope, and simmering passion. And yet, like a sharp knife, reality cut through that moment when he realized they had gathered the fragments of their lives only to witness them fracture further. "But life happened," he said, his expression darkening momentarily. "We wouldn't allow ourselves that indulgence of dreaming." Her gaze lingered on him, more intent than he had ever seen. Indulgence, or just sheer necessity? We chose security when perhaps we should have chosen love. With that, a new hypothesis unraveled in his mind. Had every commitment he made, every responsible choice, been merely an escape from the real risk of vulnerability? As he peered into her eyes, he started to understand that perhaps their choices were less a rejection of each other, but a fear of the very emotions and aspirations that had once sparked between them. A wind swept across the platform, carrying whispers of another life, and the urgency within Sam reached a fever pitch. Would he solidify the walls he'd built, or would he dare to scale them? The question became a profound challenge, surfacing a latent courage he hadn't known resided within. Just as the moment thickened with possibility, an unexpected figure approached, a colleague from years past, jovial and entirely oblivious. Sam's heart sank. Would this playful distraction drive a wedge deeper into their burgeoning conversation? "Sam, it's been years," the colleague exclaimed, and just like that, the fragile thread of intimacy began to fray. As their professional life interjected into his pivotal moment, an unsettling feeling brewed in Sam's gut. The warmth of Margaret's presence became overshadowed by the distraction of the familiar. Would he retreat again into the comfort of routine, or could he rise to the occasion, embracing vulnerability amidst the unexpected chaos? He faced her, the decision burning in his chest, to embrace the risk of connection once more, or let uncertainty guide him back into a life of what-ifs. With resolute determination, Sam prepared to reclaim the moment. He took a step toward Margaret, intent on weaving their past with the possibilities of the future, ready to shatter the barriers that had kept him captive for so long. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, the distant sound of another train echoed on the tracks. Reality surged back, and he questioned if he would let this second chance slip away, like grains of sand, once more. Would he summon the courage to seize the moment, or would his fear of the unknown hold him back yet again? As the voice of his colleague faded into the background, Sam felt the weight of his own hesitations. Yet just beyond the banter of familiar faces, a world filled with potential stood waiting.
It was an unsettling juxtaposition, his past clamoring for recognition, and the present pleading for clarity. "Hey, we should catch up, Sam." His colleague's jovial tones sliced through the tension, a stark reminder of the life he had accepted, however unfulfilling it might be. In that instant, he recognized the chasm that lay between this mundane existence and the vivid memories ignited by Margaret's presence. Would a conversation filled with pleasantries truly serve him, or was this an invitation to slip further into routine? With every passing second, a sense of urgency enveloped him. It was not just about Margaret. It was about confronting himself, about reclaiming aspects of his identity he had long buried beneath professional responsibilities and societal expectations. He grappled with the realization that stepping forward meant unraveling the tightly wound fabric of his current life, job security, expected choices, and the fear of vulnerability. As his colleague's laugh echoed, Sam turned back to Margaret, who watched him with an expectant gaze. There was hope, raw and palpable, glimmering in her eyes. What would it take to break free from the bindings of fear? What transformations awaited if he chose to embrace this moment, however unpredictable it might be? "I think I need to talk to you," he began, steeling himself against the cacophony around them. This was his chance to speak truth, to acknowledge the feelings and aspirations he had swept aside over the years. There was no guarantee of happiness, but ignorance could no longer be his refuge. It was a choice, one rooted deeply within him, to confront or comply. Margaret raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "Talk? About what?" she prompted gently, closing the distance between them. The warmth of her presence settled over him, urging him to dig deeper. "About us, about what we left behind, and maybe about what we could still have." His heart raced at the words spilling from his lips. Could this really be happening? Was he risking everything for a chance at a long-forgotten dream? The reality was daunting yet exhilarating. "Sam," she began, hesitation threading her tone, "we've both changed. Things are different now. Life is complicated." Complicated. The word echoed within him, resonating as both a truth and a challenge. Every life decision he made had been to avoid complications, the anticipated fallout from a risk taken. But standing here, faced with someone who wants to find him, Sam felt an overwhelming urge to embrace the complexity inherent in human connection rather than flee from it. "Life is complicated," he echoed softly, but his conviction grew. Maybe facing it together is the best way forward. We spent so long apart, but I still care about you. I can't let this moment pass without trying. Margaret's eyes widened, her expression shifting from uncertainty to a flicker of hope. "You really mean that?"
Before he could answer, the train's horn blasted, cutting through the charged atmosphere with brutal finality. The moment felt suspended, echoing with the promise of what could be, yet fraught with the impending reality of departure. "Let's grab a coffee first, just before we get swept away in this current." His invitation hung in the air, and he could see her weighing the implications. A flash of vulnerability passed between them, igniting an ember of determination that propelled him forward. He stepped firmly into the unfolding chapter of their story, an invitation laced with both desperation and hope as he extended his hand once more. Just as she hesitated, calculating risks and weighing desires, Sam felt the tug of uncertainty. The world around them blurred again as the noise of the station seemed to amplify the decision confronting them both. Would she grasp his hand, signifying the embrace of a tumultuous journey toward the unknown? The train pulled into the station, and with it came the realization he was running out of time. The fear of another missed opportunity rippled through his mind, pushing him over the edge. "Margaret, please," he urged, his voice shaking. "Let's not let another chance slip away." As she turned to look at him, the moment crystallized. Their futures hinged on this single instance, encapsulating their shared history and unvoiced dreams. Would she step into the chaos alongside him, or would they forever remain two souls wandering through the echoes of what once was? With time slipping through his fingers, like the grains of sand he feared, Sam felt the pulse of destiny thrumming just beneath the surface. Would he finally embrace the unknown, or would he retreat back into the safety of a life meticulously crafted, but emotionally barren? Either way, the choice would change everything. The moment hung in the air, electric and thick with emotions unspoken. Sam held his breath as he watched Margaret's hesitation shift into contemplation. In that split second, he realized the magnetic pull of their shared past was enough to ignite something dormant within him. He dared to hope as she stepped closer, her uncertainty fading like mist under the morning sun. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely rising above the buzz of the station. "Let's go get that coffee." Relief washed over Sam, but with it came the rush of adrenaline. This decision was just the beginning, a mere prelude to the complex symphony that lay ahead. He could feel every note already vibrating in his core. As they walked towards the exit, their shoulders brushing against one another, the ambient noise of the station transformed to the backdrop of a movie scene. They were not just two former friends. They were explorers stepping into the uncharted territory of possibility. Finding a small cafe nestled at the edge of the station, they settled into a corner booth, the steam rising from their mugs like the ghosts of dreams rekindled.
Sam took a moment to collect his thoughts. How could he articulate the tempest that had been raging inside him for years? The fear was palpable, but so was the Thomas of change. "Why now?" Margaret asked, her face softening as she stirred her coffee. "What made you reach out after all this time?" He looked down at the rich brown of his drink, contemplating his own answer. "It's hard to explain. I think I just realized that I've been living in a rut, convinced that comfort means stability. But every day felt more like a cycle than a life. He glanced up, meeting her gaze. When I saw you again, it dawned on me that I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. A fleeting smile played at Margaret's lips. So you're saying I was your wake-up call? In a way, yes, he admitted, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. You remind me of who I could be, a version of me I've buried under work and the safe choices I made. Margaret leaned in, intrigue deepening in her eyes. But what else do you want, Sam, beyond the nostalgia? The question sent ripples through him, forcing him to confront the full breadth of his desires. I want to take risks. I need to explore life with excitement rather than dread. If that means reaching out to old friends or reevaluating my career, then so be it. But I also want to know if we can find a way back to each other. Back to each other, she prompted, raising an eyebrow. That sounds like a loaded statement. It is, he exhaled, tension flaring in his chest. But I also want to be honest about my feelings. I realized that I was afraid of losing you again, so I pushed those feelings aside instead of confronting them. Margaret nodded slowly, absorbing his words as time lingered. She opened her mouth, perhaps to challenge him, yet hesitated. It was not the skepticism Sam anticipated, but rather a look of appreciation, of understanding. Honestly, I've struggled with my own fears too, Sam. Leaving a safe life seemed impossible. But maybe we can face the chaos together. There's so much I still want to explore. Their conversation shifted, morphing from tentative admissions to shared vulnerabilities, unearthing layers they had both kept buried. Time ceased to matter as they navigated the delicate terrain of their past, slowly stitching it to their uncertain future. As the hour progressed, Sam felt a rush of self-awareness. This was not just about rekindling feelings, but about embracing the challenges that lay ahead. An unfamiliar resolve ignited within him, a commitment to navigate both his life and burgeoning connection with Margaret. Just as he felt a sense of clarity, the cafe doors swung open violently, flooding the warm space with chilly air, and in stepped a figure he recognized all too well, his former boss, a relentless embodiment of the very career he considered abandoning. The man's imposing presence cast a shadow over the intimate bubble Sam and Margaret had created.
Sam, you have work to finish before the deadline tomorrow, his boss called out, his voice slicing through the quiet anticipation. The world shifted around Sam as old fears raised their ugly heads. Margaret's expression shifted, concern flickering as she turned to him, assessing the instant pressure to revert back to his former life. Would he let this encounter dictate his choices once more, sacrificing his budding connection and newfound desire for growth? The moment of decision stood stark before him. Would he choose to stand firm against the security of expectation, or surrender to the familiar? "Excuse me a moment," Sam said cautiously, standing up to face a familiar adversary. With every step toward confrontation, he was acutely aware of the stakes. Both his passion and his identity were on the line, and the resolution to his internal struggle loomed right in front of him. As he approached his boss, Sam's heart raced, and he knew without a doubt that this moment would reveal the trajectory of everything that followed. Would this be the first stand of many to reclaim his life? The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as Sam made his way toward his former boss. Each footfall echoed the internal battle brewing within him, a loud clash of aspirations versus the shackles of obligation. He could feel Margaret's eyes boring into him, her gaze a tether to the commitment he had just voiced moments earlier. "Sam, we really need to talk about your performance. I expected more dedication from you as we close the project," his boss continued, his tone a studied mix of impatience and authority. That familiar chill, the fear of reprimand, surfaced anew in Sam's chest. "I understand, but Let's cut to the chase, shall we? The deadline's looming and we can't afford distractions. You've got to prioritize work over—" The words faded as the man waved his hand dismissively, as if the complexities of Sam's life were irrelevant details in a corporate transaction. With every syllable, the room tightened around Sam. It was as if the cafe had transformed from a cozy nook into a stark interrogation chamber. But in the depths of that tightening grip, something shifted. A flicker of resolve ignited, propelling him to amplify his voice, echoing back to his conversation with Margaret. "I can't always prioritize the project. I have to be honest with myself." His boss raised an eyebrow, perplexed. "What are you saying? You're risking your career if you keep this up. Is your head even in the game?" "Maybe I'm ready to risk it," Sam replied, surprising even himself. Each word felt like a step toward liberation, even as it edged dangerously close to rebellion. His boss paused, the intensity of the moment holding a vacuum filled with anticipation. For the first time, Sam did not fold under the pressure. He leaned in.
his curiosity about who he was and who he wanted to become now eclipsing the habitual fear of failure. What do you expect to gain?
His boss shot back, his voice a mix of condescension and disbelief. But behind it lay a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even fear. "I expect to be fulfilled," Sam declared, the words spilling out like a revelation. "I want to know my worth beyond this desk and these numbers. I'm reevaluating my path, starting now." He could see the tension in his boss's shoulders, the confused battleground of dismissal and recognition. Moments like this, where one's identity is examined, have the power to redefine not only self, but also perceptions, both internal and external. Margaret watched from the booth, her expression shifting between concern and pride. The sight fortified Sam. He realized he had an ally in his corner, someone who genuinely cared about his struggle. "What about your future here?" his boss pressed, caught off guard. "You'll throw everything away? Or gain everything I never had? I've spent years caught in a cycle of fear and routine, doing what's expected. But I'm ready to break free," Sam responded, his convictions surging, resonating deeply within him. The silence that followed felt monumental, heavy with the implications of the decision Sam was making. He was not merely rebuffing his boss, he was choosing to reclaim his identity. "Fulfilling your dreams is a luxury," his boss retorted, but the edge of trepidation was visible. "Maybe I'm starting to believe it's a necessity," Sam countered, his voice steady. With those words, the atmosphere shifted, a palpable crack in the facade of the corporate world he had long been confined to. His boss stepped back, scribbling on a notepad, yet visibly rattled. "Do what you think is best, Sam, but know that success takes sacrifice." "I can handle that," Sam replied, defiance igniting a fire within him. As he turned back toward Margaret, he noted a burning interest in her eyes that mirrored his newfound clarity. He had defied the constraints of expectation, not only in his career, but also in his personal life. This chapter of Sam's struggle had birthed a flicker of potential. He now felt directed, aware that one decision could reverberate through every aspect of his life. But as he settled back into the booth, a gnawing doubt tugged at his consciousness. Had he truly made the right choice? The weight of uncertainty loomed, reminding him that the future was still unwritten, ripe with obstacles he would have to confront. Their shared connection and the risks that came with it remained precarious. As Margaret leaned forward, eyes sparkling with a mix of encouragement and realization, she posed the question that lingered. "So, what's next for you, Sam? Are you willing to venture beyond just confronting your boss?" His heart pounded, both anxious and exhilarated, as he searched her gaze, sensing the doors of opportunity yawning open. What challenges awaited beyond this moment of victory? Everything hinged on the choices he was prepared to embrace. Would he dive fully into the chaos of change that lay ahead? And perhaps more importantly, what awaited him and Margaret in this tangled web of possibilities? Sam's thoughts were racing, propelled by the adrenaline of the unexpected confrontation. Sitting in the intimate booth with Margaret, the noise of the cafe faded into a hum, leaving only the weight of his choices pressing against his lungs. The certainty he felt during the exchange with his boss began to ebb. Doubts slithered in, suggesting he might have overstepped boundaries he had never dared to contest before. "What's next?" he mumbled, almost to himself, while gazing down at the worn wood grain of the table. The questions danced in his mind like a flock of sparrows. Should he continue down this path of exploration? What if he failed, not just himself, but Margaret as well? The fear of failure crept like a cold shadow, yet beneath it burned a tiny flicker of hope. Margaret's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. "You have to figure out what fulfillment means for you, Sam. What is it you're actually passionate about?" Her question stirred something deep within him, a pulsing reminder that beneath every hesitation lay a dream he had tucked away for far too long. "I want to create," he finally answered, surprising himself again. Art had always tugged at the edges of his competency. Sketches created in secret and half-finished paintings stowed away in a forgotten corner of his mind begged to be acknowledged. "I want to channel my feelings into my work. It's not just about numbers, it's about the story behind them." Margaret nodded appreciatively, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "Then start small. You don't have to quit your job right away. What about attending a workshop, finding a community of creatives?" A rush of excitement washed over him at the thought. The idea of sharing his work, or even just learning from others, felt invigorating yet terrifying.
What if he laid bare his vulnerabilities? What if the criticism was too crushing? But was a life lived in safety worth the sacrificing of his essence? The questions seemed endless, but in that moment, clarity began to surface. It wasn't about avoiding risks, it was about selecting the right ones. Perhaps I can write again too. Beyond these projects, write about my experiences, or maybe even the things I have yet to encounter. Explore the depths of what this journey means. You have so much inside you that others could resonate with, Margaret said, her voice steady, summoning conviction. It's time to unearth it. Heart pounding, Sam realized that no matter how daunting the road ahead might be, Margaret's presence offered a glimmer of assurance. This newfound purpose felt like the first breath after submersion, invigorating and alarming all at once. Sam understood then that this wasn't merely about career fulfillment. It was deeper, a reconstruction of his identity.
Looking out the cafe window, he watched as people hurried past, wrapped in their own narratives. There was a world teeming with stories, and maybe he was finally ready to add his own voice to the chorus. "What will you do if they don't understand?" Margaret questioned, her brow slightly furrowed as if searching for a weak point in his resolve. The inquiry hit like a jolt, and for a moment, fear threatened to seep in again. "I guess I'll find out," Sam replied defiantly, "but I have to try. It's time for me to be heard." Rising from the booth, a wave of determination washed over him, momentarily overwhelming the uncertainty that once clouded his mind. The cafe grew suddenly small, containing his past within its walls, while the outside world beckoned him forth into the vast unknown. "Let's find a workshop together," he suggested, the words tumbling out with a mixture of excitement and urgency. "Maybe you can join me. Give me that push if I need it." Margaret's face lit up. "I'd love that. We can make it a journey together." As they exited the cafe, a breath of crisp air enveloped them, awakening the potential that lay dormant in the chill of routine. They stepped into the street, side by side, cloaked in the rush of potential. But one thought lingered, a nagging specter that taunted him, persistent and clear. What if stepping into this path would fracture existing bonds? In pursuing his truth, could he risk losing those who mattered most? Sam glanced sideways at Margaret, her eager stride a beacon of support, yet uncertainty loomed ahead. What sacrifices would come with the pursuit of his passion? And what would it cost him personally to foster this awakening? As they continued walking, the challenges of tomorrow whispered in the winds, urging him to tread carefully. But one thing was certain, he was moving forward, and the call to action loomed heavier than ever. The pivotal decision loomed ahead, the threshold between instinct and outcome. Would embracing his authentic self alienate those he cherished? He felt the weight of his next steps, as thrilling as they were daunting, and could not escape the pressing question that took shape in his mind. Was it possible for him to create without losing the connections he valued most? With the crisp air invigorating his senses, Sam's thoughts spiraled as he and Margaret walked down the bustling street. Each step echoed the burgeoning apprehension inside him, a mixture of excitement and fear as he began to conceptualize a life where he actively pursued his creative impulses. The chatter around them faded into a dull roar as he mulled over his choices. What if I fail? The question slinked back into his mind, a persistent reminder of the stakes involved. It was more than the fear of failure. It was the possibility of disappointment that could reach beyond himself, affecting the people he cared about. Margaret noticed his furrowed brow. "You don't have to nail every aspect of this on your first try, Sam." "It's an exploration, remember?" Her friendliness was a lifeline, but in the tangled depths of his mind, the repressed voice of self-doubt murmured, suggesting that maybe this was a fool's errand. He suggested they stop by a nearby art supply store. The idea of being surrounded by paintbrushes and canvases ignited a dormant enthusiasm within him. Entering the store was like stepping into a realm where possibility hovered like dust particles dancing in a sunbeam. Each aisle beckoned with a promise of creativity waiting to be unlocked. "Let's see what catches your eye," Margaret encouraged, her eyes sparkling with her own excitement. He moved hesitantly, his fingers trailing along the shelves, touching the boxes, brushes, and tubes of paint, each item a whisper of untapped potential. "Just imagine where this could lead you, Sam. You can channel whatever you're feeling," she said, breaking through his contemplation. The enthusiasm in her voice held potential, a thread he could follow. Yet the weight of his anticipated vulnerability stifled his breath. What if he exposed himself in his art only to be met with indifference or criticism? "I'm not ready for that yet," he murmured, more to himself than to Margaret. He hesitated, feeling the chokehold of uncertainty. The emerging artist he envisioned was still tangled in the web of self-reproach, fear of being any less than perfect. "Why not start with something simple? Maybe a sketch to test the waters," Margaret suggested. Sketch? In public? The idea felt absurd, akin to learning to swim in the middle of a storm. He glanced around the store. It was so filled with other potential artists, each harboring dreams and fears of their own. What separated them from him was their willingness to take the plunge into vulnerability, an act that felt terrifying. "I can't," he heard himself say. The word felt like a weight on his tongue, heavy and final. Margaret's expression shifted into a look of understanding, tinged with concern. "Sam, if you can't take small steps here, how will you face larger challenges later? If you want to be heard, you need to find your voice." Her words struck a chord, resonating deep within. They weren't merely an encouragement, they were a call to arms against the inner critic that held his creativity hostage. He felt a flicker of defiance rise within him, the realization that he held the power to create, regardless of others' opinions. "All right," Sam said slowly, letting the courage trickle in. "I'll try." His voice came out steadier than he anticipated, a declaration tinged with uncertainty, yet coated in determination. Margaret gave him an encouraging smile, and in that moment, he understood that art wasn't just about the outcome, it was about the journey, however uncomfortable or revealing it might be. They purchased a small sketchbook and a few pencils before deciding to find a quiet park.
As they sat on a bench under the canopy of fluttering leaves, contemplation shifted to action. Sam held the sketchbook against his thighs, fingers trembling slightly at the prospect of vulnerability. As he moved his pencil to the page, the first lines felt hesitant, but they began to flow, weaving his emotions into shape. His heart raced, not with the thrill of success, but with an intoxicating mix of fear and liberation. Somewhere in the scrawl of graphite and paper, he found an essence that felt almost sacred, the beginning of a voice he never truly embraced. But just as his focus sharpened and semblance of clarity began to emerge, a nagging doubt crept back in. Would this fleeting moment of courage be enough to inspire consistent action? Could he uphold this newfound commitment amidst the challenges lurking ahead, waiting to discourage him? As he captured the raw outline of what it meant to create, a new question formed. Would he find strength in his vulnerability, or crumble under its weight? The urgency of his journey crescendoed with each stroke of the pencil, propelling him toward a cliff of self-discovery. Little did he expect the challenges ahead would demand more than courage. They would require confrontation with his own limitations. But one thing was clear. He was at the starting line of something transformative, a path strewn with possibilities, and the pivotal question loomed larger than life. Who would Sam become when faced with the choices embedded in the honesty of his creativity? A new urgency urged him to grasp the moment before it slipped through his fingers. What awaited him in his pursuit of self-expression would test every thread of his identity, but he felt ready to face whatever came next. Would he rise above the noise, or allow it to drown him out? The pencil glided across the paper, each stroke punctuating the deeply entrenched silence surrounding him. Sam was acutely aware of every soft rustle of leaves and distant laughter, a lyrical score underscoring the emotional maelstrom brewing within. While the initial hesitancy melted through the rhythm of his hand, he faced an unsettling truth. Art demanded more than mere talent. It required an unwavering honesty about who he was and the imperfections that came with that identity. As the outline of a tree began to emerge, a flicker of exhilaration ignited within him. It wasn't about perfection, it was about authenticity. The realization pushed against the walls of his self-doubt, dislodging some embedded fears. Yet, as the drawing took form, unsettling reminders of his vulnerability crept back, weaving through his focus like a persistent vine choking the very thing it needed to thrive. "Why do I care so much?" he thought, frustration swirling within. The truth was glaring. His fear rooted itself not wholly in the act of creating, but in what the act represented,
unmasking his vulnerabilities for the world to see.
Could he confront the biting barbs of rejection with an open heart? Margaret scribbled beside him, engaging in her own world of expression, her intensity a mirror of dedication that anchored him. The stark contrast between her ease and his turmoil only deepened his reflection. He envied her fearlessness, that ability to pour herself onto the page without the weight of expectation colliding with her innate desire to express. Her laughter broke the heavy silence, inviting him to glance over at her work. She had transformed mere lines into a whimsical creature, alive with personality. It was raw and imperfect, yet unapologetic. The piece breathed freedom, a freedom Sam craved but felt miles away from achieving. "Look at this," she exclaimed, joy radiating from her. "It's imperfect, but I love it." A surge of frustration flared within him. How could she so easily embrace chaos, while he felt shackled to a notion of perfection that he himself had conjured? He was not just grappling with self-doubt, he was wrestling against an internalized standard that restricted his voice. "What if it's not good enough?" he blurted out, vulnerability spilling into the air between them, a tremor lacing his words. Margaret paused, her expression shifting into focus. "What does that even mean, Sam?" she pressed gently. "Good enough to whom? Isn't it ultimately about what it means to you?" Her words struck like a lightning bolt, igniting a profound epiphany in him. The pursuit of approval, whether conscious or subconscious, was a prison of his own making. What if he dared to let go of the expectation? What freedom could arise if he simply allowed the art to be a reflection of his emotional truth? He reoriented his focus on the sketchbook, grounding himself in the sensation of graphite against paper. Each stroke was a small rebellion against his overly critical self. What if he shook off the need for external validation and instead acknowledged the catharsis of expressing his tangled emotions? It felt audacious yet liberating. As he dove back into the sketch, a small part of him began to embrace the chaotic beauty of imperfection. He pushed away visions of judgment and instead welcomed the complexities of his own truth, however murky or flawed. In that moment, a new question crystallized in his mind. What would it mean to let go, to create for the sake of creation? He was no longer a mere participant in this unfolding chapter of his life. He was on the precipice of transformation, ready to unearth layers of himself that had been dormant for far too long. Yet as the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, brushing the park in hues of gold, a shadow of apprehension loomed over him. Could he completely liberate himself from the confines of expectations? The voice of doubt snarled at the edges of his clarity, warning that this newfound acceptance was fragile, a flickering flame waiting to be snuffed out by fear.
With each line drawn, Sam knew the journey ahead required relentless courage and a resolve tempered by discomfort. He felt suspended between the exhilaration of revelation and the potential to fall prey again to his insecurities. With fresh resolve, he closed his eyes for a brief moment, envisioning his future as a canvas yet to be painted, a tapestry of risks and courage threaded together by an honesty only he could own. But deep down he wondered, what would it take to transform this moment into a lasting commitment to himself? The journey was just beginning, and he felt as if he were standing at the edge of a cliff with the horizon glowing in front of him. Yet a question haunted him. With the weight of uncertainty still pressing down, would he manage to maintain this momentum when the doubts returned with a vengeance? The next morning found Sam shrouded in a haze of uncertainty, an echo of last night's revelations clinging to him like a damp fog. He awoke with a burning desire to channel his introspection into something tangible. The sketchbook lay open on the table, filled with spontaneous strokes that teetered between chaos and clarity. But as he stared into the lines, his earlier sense of liberation began to dissolve, replaced by a creeping apprehension. What will happen when I try to share this? The thought lingered in his mind like a specter. He felt the weight of potential rejection pressing against his chest, squeezing the resolve that had begun to blossom. There was promise in the vulnerability he had unearthed, yet the thought of exposing his art to others felt akin to standing in front of a mirror reflecting his deepest insecurities. He had a decision to make. Was he willing to invite others into his chaotic world of creation, or would he retreat into the shadows, allowing fear to dictate the terms of his growth? The allure of pushing past this threshold resonated within him, a flicker of determination igniting amid the doubt. He grabbed the sketchbook and stepped outside, the fresh morning air mingling with the scent of dew-kissed grass. With each step he felt the pull of liberation intertwine with the dread of vulnerability. Perhaps he could build a bridge between these contrasting states. Perhaps he could transform this moment into a lesson that would solidify his commitment to authenticity. Finding solace beneath a sprawling oak, Sam unfolded his sketchbook. He hesitated at first, his hand poised over the page, before he immersed himself in the rawness of the moment.
He sketched the intricacies of nature surrounding him, the gnarled roots, the rustling leaves, and the flicker of life in the creature darting nearby. Each stroke began to feel like an act of defiance. He was no longer shackled to his less-than-perfect output. His focus shifted inward, drawing strength from the imperfections around him.
Could this acceptance, mingled with joy, ignite a fire in his creativity that could no longer be extinguished by external forces? Hours passed like fleeting minutes as he poured his soul into the sketches, losing himself in the process. Yet even his fervor was met with a haunting thought. Would anyone appreciate this view of the world? The question lingered, a silent antagonist lurking in the background, waiting to strike when he felt most vulnerable. Margaret's laughter floated from a distance, beckoning him back into the community he both craved and feared. Gathering his sketchbook, he felt the weight of deliberation loom over his next step. Inviting her into the world he had wrought felt monumental. What if she found it lacking? Every logical impulse screamed at him, sending him spiraling back into doubt. Still, Sam took a breath and approached her. "Can I show you something?" he asked, voice wavering with uncertainty that was all too familiar. Her eyes lit up, genuine interest pooling in her expression. "Of course, I'd love to see." As he opened the sketchbook, his anxiety fluctuated like the lines on the page. As he revealed the sketched scenes, he prepared himself for critique, yielding to the instinct to brace for rejection. What couldn't be unseen was his gripping need for validation. Internal turmoil churned, threatening to undo the courage he had summoned. Margaret's gaze darted across the pages, pausing on each creation. The silence felt interminable, charged with the weight of anticipation. "This is beautiful," she finally said, delight radiating in her words. "You captured the essence of the moment. This feels raw and real, the way art should be." Her affirmation pierced through his fog of doubt, flooding him with warmth and a complex mix of relief and joy. However, a darker thought shadowed her praise. What if her approval was simply a reflection of her kindness, rather than an honest acknowledgement of his ability? Would his fear transform into courage after this exchange, or would doubt continue to gnaw at the edges of his freshly sparked determination? As he basked in the fleeting moment of validation, he contemplated the next step, how to remain committed to his growth without the crutch of external affirmation. The dialogue within him had shifted, but Sam was acutely aware that the battle was far from over. He sensed the unpredictable path ahead, teeming with self-discovery and potential pitfalls. How then could he cultivate his resilience in the face of looming uncertainties? Questions lingered over him like the weight of the sky, and he understood the real challenge was just beginning. What lay ahead was a profound confrontation with the very essence of who he thought he could become, a journey toward turning vulnerability into strength, and the constant battle against the echo of his inner critic that still persisted. With determination renewed, Sam made his way back to the oak.
Sketchbook in hand, he understood that he was on a precipice, ready to leap into an odyssey that would redefine his perspective and purpose. But would he land safely, or fall into the depths of unfounded fears that awaited him? Sam awoke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose, the sun streaming in through his window, illuminating the path ahead. Today was not just another day. It was an opportunity to solidify the decisions he had made and to embrace the journey he had chosen. He felt the weight of possibility hanging in the air, igniting a determination that had long lain dormant. In the mirror, he caught a glimpse of the man he was becoming. The lines of age and regret were no longer shackles, but testaments to a life lived in search of authenticity. He stood taller, exuding a solid confidence born from acknowledging his past while embracing the future. Today marked a turning point where he would conquer his fears and take actionable steps toward the creative exploration he had yearned for. With his sketchbook tucked under his arm, Sam set off toward the local community arts center, a place that had once seemed daunting, but now endured as a beacon of opportunity. He had found a flyer for a workshop meant for emerging artists, and it sparked a flicker of excitement within him. Perhaps today would be the day he finally embraced that inner voice, allowing it to thrive. Arriving at the center, he felt the familiar knot of anxiety grip his chest. The buzz of lively chatter filled the hallways, a cacophony of hope and aspiration. It was staggering to consider that within these walls, countless others were forging their paths, confronting their fears, just as he was. He inhaled deeply,
allowing the scent of paint and creativity to fill his lungs. Taking a moment to center himself, he reminded himself of the determination he had forged through his conversations with Margaret. This was his moment to test the resolve he had built and the convictions he had uncovered. His heart raced as he stepped into the main studio. The workshop began, and the instructor encouraged everyone to share their intentions for attending. Sam listened as individuals spoke of their dreams, some shy, some passionate. When his turn arrived, he felt the weight of every previous hesitation, judgment, and fear lingering in the air. But this time, instead of retreating, he expanded his chest and spoke about his desire to express himself artistically, how creating had rekindled something profound within him. I want to embrace the imperfections in my art and use it as a vehicle for exploring my identity. I want to connect with others through vulnerability, he stated, his voice steady and clear. As he spoke, he watched the room react, nodding heads, appreciative smiles. At that moment, he accomplished a significant milestone: transparency. By simply stating his intentions, Sam felt a transformative power flowing through him.
He was no longer merely a passive observer in his life, but an active participant, advocating for his own growth. The workshop unfolded, lively discussions and collaborative endeavors prevailing throughout. Each activity offered Sam an opportunity to push the boundaries of his comfort zone. He sketched alongside others, finding solace in their shared vulnerabilities and excitement. He created pieces that resonated with his tumultuous emotions, capturing the contrast of light and shadow that existed within his psyche. His works came alive on paper, the tension of his insecurities yielding to a strength he had never fully acknowledged. As the day progressed, something astonishing happened. He felt validated not solely by the praise of others, but through his own acceptance of the imperfections in his craft. He was learning that art was not about achieving some idealized standard, but rather embracing the process, a lesson solidified by the encouragement and camaraderie that blossomed among fellow creatives. Later, when the workshop concluded, filled with ensuing fleeting moments of fear and triumph, Sam excitedly sought out the instructor, wanting to discuss his work further. The feedback he received was constructive and firm, yet encouraging, one that celebrated his perspective and urged him to delve deeper into the challenges that art presented. Sam could see it now, not just as a conjuring of ideas, but an ongoing dialogue with himself, an exploration of the complex layers of human experience. As he walked home, the sketchbook under his arm felt lighter than it had ever before. In rejecting the constraints of accolades and pleasing others, he'd found something akin to liberation. Each stroke of graphite was a bridge he had built between who he had been and who he was now aspiring to become. With a renewed sense of clarity, Sam decided he would not stop here. This exploration was just beginning. He envisioned opening an exhibition to showcase his work, highlighting the stories behind each piece, the imperfections woven into their fabric, a bold declaration of his identity. When he arrived back home, he flipped open his sketchbook, reviewing the marks he'd made throughout the day. This was it. These lines of creativity weren't just remnants of a fleeting moment. They were powerful testimonials to his evolution. Sam could sense the shifts within him, the merging of who he had been with who he could now become. Confidence blossomed, rooted firmly in the revelations of the past and ambitions born in the present. A journey filled with uncertainty still stretched ahead, but he was ready to face it head-on. Finally, as twilight coalesced into night, Sam couldn't shake the smiling thought. He had not only chosen a path of creation, he had elected to embrace the entirety of himself and his narrative. He looked forward to sharing this journey with Margaret, and perhaps they could align their visions of vulnerability and courage, tackling the world together. For the first time in years, Sam felt fulfilled, not just by external validation, but by a profound sense of belonging within himself, a revelation that granted him the clarity to embrace every uncertainty ahead with unwavering strength. This moment was significant, a concrete achievement in reclaiming his life and identity. He was ready to step into a future painted with hope, a tapestry woven from threads of courage, vulnerability, and limitless exploration. Now more than ever, he understood the importance of seizing this moment, embracing who he was becoming, moving forward without hesitation, because with every step, he proved that transformation was not just a dream, it was entirely possible. If you resonate with Sam's journey and want more uplifting stories of overcoming life's challenges, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to boost the algorithm and help others find inspiration. Comment below your feelings and theories about Sam's transformation. And most importantly, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's inspire others together.